Okay, let's see, what do we got? Yep, okay. Uh, Good afternoon, folks. Hope it's nice and sunny and bright where you are. It is here. Um, and just this afternoon, I was able to, or my son was able to get the last of the ice off of our sidewalk that had operated as a 8-degree skating rink for the last 4 days. So I guess I will not get sued after all because of the next person falling down. Uh, I'll update you just very briefly on. We're probably not going to be here much more than an hour this evening. I'm dealing with a partially detached retina and all few other things in my left eye that just suddenly decided to do that 4 or 5 days ago, and so I've been uh, in an eye patch for a few days, but and it gives me about an hour, and that's about all I can look at a screen, and then I have to do something else. So, uh, what the doc assures me it'll be all fine. It's just old guy with a detached retina that will probably uh, pull itself back together and won't need laser stuff or anything like that. So we'll see how that goes. The uh, we also this past week have been quarantined a little bit because my son, who's an attorney, was one of his clients was had active COVID and didn't bother to inform the practice, and so he was exposed. So he had to get a test, and he had to quarantine, which means we had to quarantine for 4 or 5 days. And he came back negative, so everything is fine. But it was just a real crummy uh, kind of weekend and early week. So we're getting there. But I apologize. It's just what can you do? Two things I did want to do in the time we have. And so if you see me fiddling with my eye or put my hand over my eye or something like that, it's nothing. Uh, I'm not being aghast at what you may have just said. I'm just kind of keeping the eye in the dark as much as possible. Um, the two things I wanted to do. One was to go back and kind of just a very few minutes, just talk about the notion of strategic planning and developing a strategic plan. Hopefully, you got a chance to read the Tracy section that dealt with strategic planning, and you might, if you know what's required in North Carolina, that might look kind of familiar because the directions that she deals with for strategic planning is identical directions to what you may find coming out of the State Department of Ed in North Carolina, uh, because it's the most common model and the one that almost everybody uses these days. So, I don't know that we need to dwell on that a lot. You just need to be aware of what that model looks like, the steps in that model, and the pieces of the model that have to be done a certain way, and the role of the uh, team, the school improvement team, on that development of those models and development of a school improvement plan based upon a strategic plan. So uh, just be aware that that is kind of an expectation that you will have to kind of carry with you, that you need to know kind of what those steps are. And so this evening, I kind of wanted to see what you were asked to look at your particular school's strategic plan, not strategic plan, but school improvement plan. and to offer or to kind of take a really good look at what's in there, because your assignment, your individual assignment for developing a school improvement plan for particular outcomes, particular goals, is kind of driven around, at least as much as you possibly can, what already exists for your school. And so I wanted to find out, and I suspect I know the answer, if kind of how you felt about what you saw, what you read, what you looked at. Was there anything in there that really surprised you? I mean, how often had you been aware of what was in that strategic plan? And is it something that you see on a daily basis, or see on at least a weekly basis? And excuse me, just to see if what you found was what you had hoped it would be. And so, with those series of questions in mind, I guess I want to solicit your input as to what'd you find, what'd you see, what surprised you, what didn't surprise you, all of those things. So, it's your floor.
I'll say one thing with our the strategic plan at our school is that all of the goals are still pre-COVID. And so, for instance, 5% increase on EOG scores in math and ELA and 8th grade science. And then to reduce the achievement gap between African American students and our other students. And so I'm interested. We didn't update them this year because nobody anticipated that we would be out. We just had our 6th graders start back this week. Nobody anticipated that we would be out this long. But even then, the growth will be going off of 2-year-old data by the time we get it. And so it'll be interesting to see how that gets adjusted, because all of the measurements are they're not applicable now. So.
Okay. Katie, I think you were going to say something, or were you? Or
yeah, I was going to say something. I agree. It is mostly pre-COVID, but there was a change made for our goal that it says Clemens will see a 25% in student engagement and attitude during remote learning when compared to student engagement in the spring of 2020. And I didn't realize that had been changed. So they did try to take into account this year, how are we going to make it better than it was? Because in the spring, it was a disaster. From the time that we left in March, it just kind of blindsided everybody. So there have been things I think that we've tried to do definitely this year. I think all school districts have, to try to make it better. So it was interesting to see that was listed as one of the goals. But something else that surprised me about ours was I just never looked at the whole thing, and to see how much effort goes into like our sit chairs, how frequently they're in there updating and putting notes and everything. It was just really interesting for me to see that side of it.
Yeah, good. Someone else, please.
Dr. Bolton, looking over our school improvement plan, it was interesting to see how I guess I was on the team that's been 3-4 years ago, and just how little has changed and been updated over the course of the last few years, and how much information has just been recycled. And so I don't, if we're doing it just for lip service, or we're actually implementing these policies and strategies that we are proposing. And then the other thing I noticed was just the mistakes that had been made, people mislabeled. And then for one thing, kind of tying into what we discussed with mission and vision, the first thing that I noticed on ours was the mission statement and the vision statement were exactly the same. And they had somebody just copied and pasted. So I just wondered how much oversight had gone into going back and checking for specific errors and updating that routinely.
And I'll just tack on to what Sam was just talking about. To be honest with you, looking at our plan at my school, I mean, it really is. It looks like somebody was just trying to go through and check the boxes I mean, it talks about Chromebook one-to-one implementation, use of Google Classroom, but it's no new information. It's just somebody just, refreshing it just so they can check a box. And that's sad to see.
Mhm. It is. I mean, but it's not unusual to see that. I was looking at one, just the other day, just kind of, I asked, someone to provide me a couple and from couple of different places, and they did. And one of the ones, actually, it was labeled school improvement plan, but it was actually the school safety plan, and which I thought was okay. Now I can understand, being in a rush. I can understand being, you know, uh, typos and things like that, but I can't understand how you could, uh, not see the difference between a school safety plan and a school improvement plan. And so it was, uh, kind of, I don't want to, I'm not walking away from comments. I just want to interject here just a second. The it is often one of those non-priority items because uh, the leadership of the school, or for whatever reason, there's this notion that the most important job in a school is to keep the lid on, to make sure you know where all the kids are and make sure that nothing really bad happens in the school. And that you can, as a principal, you can get by just doing that, but you can't really speak to improvement. You can't really maximize the resources you have in teachers and materials and equipment, and you can't really do all those things that you would want to do if you just keep the lid on and make sure you know where all the kids are, because it's not that doesn't improve learning. That all that does is create a safe babysitting spot maybe. And that's about the same thing you would do in in an early childhood childcare center. You keep the lid on and make sure you know where all the kids are at. But if you're wanting to be a school leader or school principal, you have to realize that there's bigger fish that have to be fried, and a lot of that has to do with this notion of a strategic plan and an idea, an agreed upon idea within the school of what needs to happen to really take the school to the next notch, or improve student success within the school, or close gaps within the school, or whatever the basic idea is that you want to do, whatever the overarching idea is. It takes more than just keeping order, and it's kind of sad to see. But there's also kind of a generational thing here. Now and I can speak to this because I am in that older generational sphere here. But it's been kind of interesting to watch that. If you watch what's going on, say in corporate America, or you watch what's going on in manufacturing America, or whatever, you see quite a different uh, mindset and cultural thought pattern between the employees that are, say, 55 and older, and the employees that are 40 and younger. Now I know there's a gap in between those two things, but I think even in that gap you see a kind of a split where there are some folks that are kind of operating in a cultural mindset that's no longer there, or at least doesn't appear to be there among society, and with the diverse populations and some of the cultural concerns we have now and all that. And the to use a kind of a broad term, the younger administrators coming in, because there is a difference in perception of culture, and there is a difference in perception of what leadership's all about. And so it is in the 55 and up, it's pretty much top down sort of idea. though you do have exceptions, you do have very progressive leaders in the 55 and up, but you know, you do see sort of that generational divide happening. And you know, the other thing I wanted just to mention too was what Katie was talking about, you know, not aware of, you know, it was really kind of eye-opening to see all the things going on in that plan and in that building. And that's because you're coming from a focus in which you're focused around a particular job or a particular content or a particular grade level, typically. And you know, when you move into the administrative offices, you no longer can carry that mindset with you. You have to have the mindset that, okay, I need to know what's happening all over the building. Now, that's different from micromanaging. That's quite different from micromanagement. But you do need to know, you know, all the pieces that are going on and have some way of communicating, you know, that information down through the school. One of the things that we don't do in this class that we need to do in some class, and I don't know whether it occurs or not, is to talk about a communication plan from the you know, leadership in the building, because everybody needs to be on board and everybody needs to know what all's going on in the school, even though some of that may not be your focus. But at least if you're aware of what other people are doing and kind of how all that's fitting together, then you can kind of understand if, you know, maybe you don't get your budget item this year, because you can understand why it needed to go someplace else, why budget needed to go someplace else. But at the same time, you can, you know, build an argument with your peers as to what needs to be funded and what needs to be, you know, kind of dealt with. So it's, you know, those two things are fairly apparent in terms of looking at how schools, you know, the transition from an instructional role or a resource role into a school leader role, is that suddenly you got to have your hands on a whole lot of stuff, just so you can be aware of what's going on in the building and not, you know, not be caught off guard by those things. I mean, you're going to be caught off guard every day about something, but you know, not to be caught off guard by, you know, things like that. Not knowing what, you know, something, the full details of what's going on in a particular area or a particular project or a particular initiative. So, you know, those things I think are important pieces to feed into this leadership puzzle that you're trying to put together for yourself. You know, that you do now have to have a broader view, and you can't fall back in, you know, a comfort zone of, you know, keeping the lid on and making sure you know where all the kids are, because you have to be able to do more. You have to be able to manage the building, manage the people in the building, and you know, that takes a broader perspective. And so having a strategic plan, and then an improvement plan, and a school improvement team that's an honest to God school improvement team, and not some other, whatever you might want to call it, means that you are making sure that the initiatives that are taking place, the priorities that are set, are building priorities and not individual priorities, because they need to be building priorities. So, any other observations on your look at school improvement plans for your building, and surprises or disappointments or?
I was going to say one thing, actually two things. The first thing I noticed with all three of I'm at a middle school, our main goals on our school improvement plan were all about growth and about individual demographic groups. And so that was just kind of interesting to me. It makes sense that it's that specific to this individual group needs to grow by this much. This individual group needs to grow by this much. So that was kind of interesting to me. And then the second thing, my school, like Katie's school, added in one thing because of COVID, and that was about social emotional well-being of students, which, like we all know, is probably the number one priority of our school's students right now. So
Yeah, the trauma thing, because there will be a trauma barrier to overcome with students, because they'll just be traumatized. I mean, that it may not be apparent, it may not be obvious, but they will be suffering from some level of trauma of sorts, and it'll be up to the schools to try to help with that, you know, or try to help the parents help with that too, because you know, parents are you see your kids every day, and so you don't necessarily see the subtle differences that occur with kids that can tip you off to trauma. You know, do they suddenly get quiet? Well, of course, middle school kids all suddenly get quiet, you know. And so you kind of, if you're kind of thinking, okay, well, that's just kind of normal for them. Well, maybe not. I mean, you have to take a look at it. You have to, you know, try to figure out if that's a normal reaction or is that a trauma-driven reaction. Yeah. Other.
One observation that I had was just kind of reflecting and thinking on the trickle down as far as how the different committees in your building and the conversations that we have in PLC and the conversations in staff meetings, how they're, you know, in alignment towards helping us meet those goals. I just thought that, I mean, of course it should be that way, but I was happy to, you know, to see that my school, I feel like that there is an alignment.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's probably a linkage between what goes on in the PLCs and you know, what's laid out in the school improvement plan, which is that part of that communication model. I mean, you have to have avenues to get the, you know, to get the word out, and to for teachers to bring teachers and staff to bring information up, but also to get word back down to them, because the, you know, school building gets busy. There's a lot going on in the school, and I know that right now you add the virtual pieces to it, and you know, it's just crazy time. But you still have to have, even in maybe crazy times, the time you have to have it, you still have to have those communication patterns that are working and functioning on a regular basis. And whether you use you know, PLCs or discipline teams or grade level teams, or you know, whatever you use, you have to have a way of you getting that communication done, and making sure that everybody stays in the loop, so to speak. Other thoughts or comments about what you saw?
I was kind of interested to see that some of the programs and things that were used like in the past years didn't just go away, but we've still implemented them. We've added some on top, but they're still, you know, still being used and still relevant. I thought that was pretty interesting that they've continued and they've lasted.
Mm-hmm. And that shows the, you know, the circular notion of the plan, because if you try something to improve something and it works, yeah, then it just becomes part of the structure. Now, eventually it probably should, you know, kind of fade away from the plan, because it becomes the status quo. And the improvement plan is always looking to see if there's a better way to do, you know, than the status quo you got. But if the status quo is working, then you don't need to improve it. And so it's a, you know, the whole thing about doing school improvement plan is to test ideas, to see if there's a way of testing particular ideas or particular programs or particular thoughts, and you know, make some sort of decision whether they are have created improvement. And then obviously the, you know, the big one big ones that probably should be floating into plans now are the trauma-based stuff, but also the gaps, because the gaps between student groups and things like that are going to grow. And so the schools are going to have to figure out how to do that. And I don't know, up here, one of the favorite things that's being tossed around, and I have mixed feelings about it, is this notion of summer schools, 6 or 8 week summer schools that they're going to, require for certain students. Well, I mean, that seems to me to be, okay, I understand why they're doing that, but I also understand that the students that they may be requiring it of, it may create some sort of a stigma. Certainly, it may create, if not going to require it of everybody, it's going to, create some issues within the community and the folks that, student groups that maybe need the work the most and will be required to do it are the ones that will be less likely to be able to do it because they have to work, or, up here it's still a fairly agricultural area. And so, kids work on the farms during the summer. We have a lot of Mennonites up here. And so Mennonites have big families that run the farms and that sort of thing. So, and some of them go to the public schools, some go to Mennonite schools, but a fair portion of them go to public schools. And so you have a community up here where I'm from that has a 62 different dialects spoken in the school system among 4,000 students, 4,500 students, I guess. And so it's it's a very diverse place. And now they're thinking about requiring, summer school, but just for some kids. And so that's, to me, I'm kind of trying to get my hands around, is that a good model? And I haven't sorted my notions out yet. I don't know for sure if it is, but there's something about it that bothers me, but I can't put my fingers on it quite yet. And you're probably hearing similar discussions down there of interterm or summer. Sometimes they call it interterm or something like that, but they're basically they're wanting to use summer school to use as a catch up. And so I have some mixed sentiments about that, but all the school improvement plans are going to have probably those two elements in them, if not anything else new. And that is the trauma piece. And then also the, what do we do with the gaps that are widening? How do we attack those gaps and do it in a way that doesn't, further traumatize students? So what are they talking about in some of your divisions? Are they talking about anything for the summer, anything to catch those kids up? Or
One of the things that we're talking about at my school right now is they're calling it Acceleration Academy, I think.
yeah,
And they're trying, I guess there's COVID money, I guess, available to the district to try to help out with all of the learning loss that's occurred. And so they're going to be offering Tuesday and Thursday after school tutoring, and trying to get approval for a Friday morning tutoring, or no, I'm sorry, not Friday, Saturday morning tutoring. So it would be like from maybe 9 to noon. I think that's what the time frame is that they're looking at, trying to make it fun and kind of make it kind of a little competitive. But we have a lot of kids in Forsyth County. We have school choice. So a lot of our kids, and then when they brought them back, they can't provide transportation for the kids who are out of the zone with COVID restrictions. And so a lot of our kids that would normally choose to come into school can't for transportation reasons, because their kids can't come in. So the hope is that, or their parents can't get them to work, get this to school because they have work. So the hope is that maybe some of these kids can come in on Saturday morning to try to catch them up a little bit. I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. But I just wonder we don't have a lot of kids who are choosing to come into our building right now. So those are the only ones that would be invited for Tuesdays and Thursdays. But this Saturday, maybe it'll appeal to some of the kids that can't get there otherwise and help a little bit.
Yeah, they're gonna look for all kinds of models, but there is COVID money out there for these school catch-up efforts. And I think in the new, I forget the exact dollar amount, but it's significant. In the new relief bill that Congress is working on, there's maybe there's a specific set aside for school catch up. I can't remember exactly how they phrased it, but it's a significant amount of money. It might be, 70, $80 billion or something like that. So they are, Congress is providing the money. Now it's up to the school, the state and the schools to decide to go after it. I mean, it's just not going to come as a blanket pot. I mean, they're going to have to put programs together and just like any other grant like thing, not quite as bad as a grant, but they're going to have to design programs and have that put together. But if that makes it through and gets passed, which I suspect it probably will, because it's something that everybody wants, there's a pot to start working with there for schools to school divisions to put some special programs together for that. I'll try to find out more about that and maybe send you an email or something that's got the exact amounts in it. I haven't. I'm a few days behind on my reading of blogs and stuff like that, but I'll catch that up. Other thoughts about any of that? You met as groups last week, right? And you're meeting as groups again next week. Hopefully, maybe a few times in between here and there. But I have pulled up and put a marker on them, the folders that you created for the groups, the shared folders, and have begun to now that I've got them in one spot, I'm starting to go through those and just check your rules and things like that. And if I have any suggestions, I'll mention something on it. But more likely than not, at this point, I'm just trying to track that a bit. Now, sometime about a month from now or so, I'll ask you to do a kind of a draft of where you are now, and it'll be I'm sure not a complete draft, but that's fine. I just want to know where you are. And if I have any concerns or real structural feedback I need to give you at that point, I'll do it then. But otherwise, I'm kind of leaving it up to the groups to, manage yourself and make sure that these things happen as they need to happen. That first reflection piece that you did, I have begun to look at those, but of course I've begun to look at the Monday section first, since I will see them again before you, and so I'm trying to get theirs knocked out. But once again, I had to cut back on my reading time, so hopefully I'll get those things reacted to maybe by the weekend or the first of next week. But once again, that's a credit. No credit thing. You submitted it. I'll provide a little bit of feedback. There's no right answer. There's no correct answer. There's no gradable answer. You'll get a credit for that. Credit will show up in the grade sheet, and then I'll turn on the grade sheet so you can see these things as they go through. And, then, all those formative pieces will be like that, with the exception of the little quiz-like thing on the law stuff, where I will provide feedback as I need. But I consider reflection to be kind of your inner thinking processes, and not something that I would say, well, this is dumb or what. No, I would never tell you that this is a really bad reflection, because reflection is you. I mean, it's what you think about something. And so, these reflection pieces are for you to take the information that you've either gleaned from the readings or what may have happened in class or whatever, and, provide your reflections to it, your thought process to it, you know. And to see, you know, if possible, think about, you know, where you need to grow and where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and, you know, use that information, because the reflections, you know, the only person that's going to see the reflections are you know, you and me. And, you know, would never give anybody advice as to what's going on in your head. I don't know what's going on in my head, so, you know, how am I going to help anybody else? But, you know, it is, I think it's a useful device to help, to have you thinking about some of these more technical processes you have to do as you kind of move into this leadership role. But yes, next week, once again, we'll take a break from that, and so that y'all can spend a little time with that. So what else do you want to talk about tonight? I mean, I'm okay for the time being. I know I've not got long because I can feel this thing start to throb a little bit at this point, but I need to get the light out of my eyes, so to speak. Sit in a dark room for a while, put my sunglasses on and watch TV or something, you know. Some such nonsense. It's getting old is pain in the butt, I can tell you that, but it beats the devil out of other options. And you have to keep a positive thing going here, you know. If you hit 70, which I did, they say there's a pretty good chance you'll make 90. So I'm shooting for 90. And if you hit 90, there's a pretty good chance you'll make 100. So, yeah, who knows? I might be around to see my grandkids' 21st birthday. I don't know. We'll find out.
Smucker's jar, it doesn't count.
Geez. Okay. Well, yeah, it's, you know, but, you know, you know, by and large, we've gotten through this thing pretty well, and I hope you have too. The other group, the Monday group, we've got 2 or 3, perhaps 4 active COVID cases in that group. Then a couple of other people that are, you know, kind of quarantined, sitting on the sidelines for a little while, but still working because they're working from home. So it is you know, it is something. And if you've managed to avoid it and have managed to avoid those fearful sort of notions, more power to you. You know, stay safe and keep yourself safe. Other thoughts about assignments or the nature of assignments or anything?
Our group had one question when we were meeting. We were talking about the programs, and we wondered if we should choose a program that's been around for a year or two, or if we can choose a program that was implemented this year.
You're
Does it
wide open.
matter?
It doesn't matter, because there will have been activity that would have occurred in either case. And you know, obviously, if you're talking about a brand new program, a lot of the evaluation is going to focus on, you know, the implementation and the structure of it and things like that. You won't necessarily have, obviously, you know, long-term data to talk about. If the programs existed, then you do have long-term data to talk about. But you know, some of the stuff that you're going to run into with programs that have been in existence for a while is the impact of the whole COVID thing in the last year or so, and all the structural anomalies that have occurred within schools. And so, you know, it may be that you didn't do what you wanted to do or was supposed to do, and it may be that you just couldn't do it. And, you know, that you couldn't do it in a COVID environment. And so there are, you know, things like that we have to be concerned about. And plus, I imagine a lot of staff development went by the wayside. that you have probably very limited staff development that occurred in the past year or so. So, yeah, I mean, it would be just as desirable to look at a new program as a past program, because there should have been activities in terms of setting it up and structuring it and all that sort of stuff.
Dr. Pearl, we also had a question as far as using, can we use other schools, like for example, if Sarah's school and my school use the same program, can we use that data as a comparison, or do you just want us to stick to the one school's data?
That's an interesting question. Maybe you could use the comparative data for a context, you know, where you're talking about the sort of the context, the community, the context, that sort of stuff. And if you have, you know, two schools that are quite different from each other, that would be very illuminating. Or if you had two schools that were like each other, and you know, that might be, well, either way, it could be illuminating either way. So I don't really, given kind of the Chinese fire drill we're in right now with schools, I think we have to kind of, yeah, I didn't use that as a derogatory term either. That just happens to be an old Army term. You know, we used to yell at people about, you know, are you in the middle of a Chinese fire drill or something like that? Except it might have been slightly saltier, okay? But I'm pretty sure I can't use the exact terms here. But yeah, given all the things that are going on, yeah, I think any data you can pull to help provide context and, you know, comparative data and all would be useful, yeah.
One other thing that we talked about with our group is just that because this is not a tradition.
Two different groups or three different groups here?
We're actually all the same group.
Okay, okay.
So that one question is
guys.
a couple of, we've been the same group for every project, I think, so far. I think a lot of us have in this cohort have stuck with our groups, but I was just wondering, like, with this year being kind of non-traditional, obviously, we don't have EOQs, we don't have benchmarks. Like when we look at progress monitoring data, we don't have as much as we typically do. We were considering using iReady because that's a newer program that we're using. Not that it's new, but it's new to our school. I can look at the iReady data, but as far as looking at if they're making significant gains, like with benchmark types of assessments that we would normally be giving district wide, I don't have anything on that yet. And so it's a little bit of an awkward time, I think, for evaluating programs this year. But is that something that's still okay to go through and just kind of look at the rollout and see how how it's being used, and look at just the data that we have from iReady classes, like the classrooms that are using it? Is that okay?
That's an approach. You can kind of go that way. You might look for non-traditional data sources. You know, if you're looking at particular content pieces, and you have teachers that do you know, like entry or exit exams, or you know, structured homework assignments and things like that. You kind of can also look at numbers. You know, you look at how many kids are doing you know, certain things, how many classrooms are doing certain things. You know, how many meetings have you had of different committees, you know, things like that. You know, some of the best data is that short-term kind of embedded data that you have in your school that we never really look at. I mean, when we talk about formative assessment, we talk about any way that you can assess your students, or assess, you know, the success of a program or the implementation or something. So, yeah, I would look, you know, use what you have, use what you can use. And keep in mind that, you know, maybe when times become a little bit more regular and a little bit more predictable, that you may want to think about going back through the thought process and saying, okay, well, let's think about using this or using that, or going back with more traditional data pieces. that it always brings to mind the fact that some of the worst data we get is the summative data for two reasons. One, it's not, there are all kinds of reliability and validity issues with some of the summative data that we get. Plus, if you use summative data that occurs at the end of the semester, end of the year, or whatever, and you discover that something is not going well, you've lost a semester or a year. And if you can use bits and pieces of formative data as you go along, you can track things as they begin to go off track and make, decisions about modifications or alterations or delivery models or whatever that happens on the fly. You do not have to do for the entire year or the entire semester or the entire grade block or whatever what you set out to do if you find it's not working. And so one of the worst things we do with these plans and all is to rely totally on summative data. Because you just lose time. You lose, a year in a kid's life or academic life is a big, long period of time. And plus it's a period of time that, there's other things could be popping up in the classroom. You could be having, classroom management issues based upon the fact that students aren't engaged and, because something's not working the way you think. So just keep in mind, think, be creative in thinking about what kind of data sources you might have available to use, because let's not think about just traditional summative stuff. Obviously, if you got it, you report it, and you have to, but you can learn as much, if not a whole lot more, on using shorter term formative measures that maybe are not as formal, but they provide very useful data. So I know I'm, speaking in strange languages here as a assessment and evaluation person that say, don't worry about all that summative data because it doesn't tell you all that much anyhow. But, just be aware that there's schools are a literal storehouse of data. And a lot of it occurs at the classroom level. And if teachers are, if there's an evaluation culture or an assessment culture in a school, then you'll find that there's a lot of other bits and pieces of information that might help, but that might not be quite as formal. But yeah, use what you got. I mean, that's basically the message there. And don't think you can't evaluate something because you don't have the full summative stuff there anymore. Yeah. How many of you have had the whole formative assessment workshop stuff? That also applies to evaluation using formative models also. I got a couple of reading pieces. I just have to find them. One of the things I used to do a lot was to go into schools and do the training stuff and the presentations on formative assessment and formative assessment models in the classroom and stuff like that. And there were several key points. One is, don't worry about grades on formative assessments, because grades don't matter in terms of formative data. You're much more interested in what the data tells you, and you don't learn anything about what students know by what they got right. You only learn what students know by what they got wrong, and things like that, and that sort of stuff. But I do have some good readings on formative measures and evaluation, and I had not thought about those for a couple semesters, but I'll see if I can put my hands on those and maybe post those up too. I think you would find that useful. Other thoughts, other questions, projects? The group work? Individual, independent stuff? Well, we'll pick the content pieces back up big time in 2 weeks. And you should be getting pretty far down the line in terms of your group projects. Certainly not meaning final draft stuff or anything like that. But you ought to be getting pretty far down the line with those in terms of knowing your data points, collecting as much as you can, all those sorts of things. And if there is a doubt between, I'll say this, if there's a doubt between what you see in the syllabus and what you see in a rubric, go with the rubric. The rubrics are a little bit more detailed than just the few comments made in the syllabus. All right, folks. I gotta go back to my pirate ways and get a patch on. Supposedly I find out next week early whether we're going to do the laser thing or whether this thing is knitting back together on its own or healing on its own. So we'll see. If you wake up wake up first thing in the morning and suddenly you see these black circular floaters in your eye with flashes of light, the flashes of light tell you it's a torn retina. The floaters tell you it's separated viscus or whatever they call that stuff in your eye that pulls away from the retina a little bit sometimes. Most of the time it heals itself, but if you ever get poked in the eye or punched in the eye, you can happen then too, or get hit too hard or hit your head hard or something like that. Me, I was just sleeping peacefully and woke up to black circles and flashes the next morning. So I don't know what my wife did to me in the middle of the night, but she's not fessing up to much of anything, but I'm sure she hit me with something, either her or the cat. But nobody's fessing up. But I forgive them anyhow. Can't hold grudges, particularly against family. All right, folks. Have a good week. Stay safe. Have a good week next week with your groups. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. And if anybody thinks we need a one-on-one face-to-face, we'll be glad to do that. Just give me an email and we'll schedule something. And we'll kind of talk through that. I keep offering that. Nobody ever takes me up on it. I don't know why. But, I'm no more scary one-on-one than I am one-on 16 or so. In fact, maybe a little more personable. I don't know. We'll find out. But anyhow, if you need me, let me know. And I will be there. Okay. Have a good evening. Stay safe.